Yesterday we began the book of Zechariah, 14-chapter book. First half deals mostly with the time of the building of the second Beit HaMikdash. Zechariah is alive now as the Jews are starting to build the second Beit HaMikdash, and much of his book is filled with these strange, just use the word strange visions. So Parak Bet, ve'esat einai ve'ereh, v'hinei arba kranot. I looked up and I saw four horns. V'omar ala malach hadober bima eleh. And I asked the angel who talked to me, what are these things? Vayomer Elai, Eila hakranot asher zeru et Yehuda et Yisrael v'Yerushalayim. He said, these are the horns that threw, right, the Zorez, to throw, like throwing seeds, that tossed Yehuda, Yerushalayim, tossed Israel. And there are those who understand the four, when we talk about four different, it's like the four kingdoms, this idea that there were going to be four kingdoms. And we'll see more about that in the book of Daniel. That's the way that many understand that. You could understand it as being not just four kingdoms, four civilizations, like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, however some people put the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, different ways of understanding it. Could also look at it as being four different sort of groups that combined together to attack Bnei Yisrael, as we saw much in the book of Yechezkel and others, that all of these nations all around, the Edomites and the Moabites and the Ammonites and the Plishtim and all Mitzrayim and everybody celebrating and attacking on to the Assyrians and Babylonians there. Conquest of Yisrael and Yehuda. Continuing verse 3. Then God shows me four workmen, four smiths. And they said, what are they coming to do? Vayomer Lemor Ela Hakranot Asher Zeru et Yehuda Kfi Ish Lo Nasa Rosho Ve'aviu Ela L'Hacharido Tam Liadot et Kranot HaGoyim Anosim Karen El Eretz Yehuda Lizrota. A mouthful. These are the horns that tossed Yehuda, so nobody at all could even stand up. And these are the workers who come to throw them into a panic, to cut them down, and to raise the nations against the land of Yehuda and toss it around. I looked up and I saw a figure holding a measuring line, a measuring tape. And I said, where are you going? And he replied, to see how long and wide Jerusalem is going to be. And this may remind you of something. Remember the second half of the book of Yechezkel, starting from, I think, chapter 41, when Yechezkel details what the second temple is going to look like. The focus is very much on the space. It's less about the vessels. We talked about that at length because it's about how God is going to be in. Is the space going to be big enough for God? How much is God going to inhabit? After the beginning of the book of Yechezkel, how God leaves Jerusalem, the Merkava travels, goes out, goes eastward, goes towards Bavel. And so here too, you could say Zechariah is in a sense a follower of Yechezkel in that way, in the understanding, or the visions of Zechariah are following the visions of Yechezkel. Vinay, or in verse 7, the angel who talked with me came forward, and another angel came forward to meet him. And he said, run and go speak with this, with this young man, with this Na'ar. Jerusalem shall be a people as a city without walls. So many people and cattle will contain. What does it mean it's without walls? Why is he measuring it? Well, it's without walls, meaning we don't have to worry about fortifications. We're not going to have to worry about people coming in and destroying our city, our land. And it's almost as if, with the one angel to another, the easiest way to understand it is the first was the angel of Bavel, and now we have the angel of Israel, as Bnei Yisrael is coming back. There in verse 9, and God says, I will be a wall of fire all around it, and my glory will be within it. And here, the wall of fire, nobody's getting through the wall of fire. It's not possible. So God's saying here, and this is continuing sort of in the last chapter where we talked about the destruction and the return, and God says, I kaneti liRushalayim, kaneti litzion. I am zealous. I want Jerusalem to prosper. I'm sick of these nations who have destroyed it. I'm going to make it a big, beautiful thing. And so that's what's continuing here with this chapter. Verse 10, Hoi, hoi, v'nusu me'eretz safon nu'um Adonai, ki karba ruchot hashamayim, perashi etchem nu'um Adonai. Go away, run to the north, says God. I will sweep you there like the four winds of heaven, says God. And this is talking to the enemies of Israel. Hoi tzion himalti, Yoshevet bat Bavel. Hoi, escape Zion, you who dwell in Bavel. interesting pasuk to try to understand what does he mean? Is he speaking to just generally, the idea of the Babylonians being spread? Is he talking perhaps about the people who are in Israel who need to come back to people in Bavel who need to come back to Israel? It seems to me that makes more sense. We know that not so many of the people who went to Bavel came back. We'll see the numbers in the 40s, close to 50,000, when we study the book of Ezra and Divrei Hayam. Continuing verse 12. Because God said, right? The God who sent me, the God of the glorious God, says about the nations, whoever touches you touches the pupil of their own eye, right? It's like they're smacking themselves. I will lift my hand against them and they will be spoiled. Then you will know I am the house of God. By spoiled, there doesn't mean spoiled rotten children, but rather broken, destroyed, damaged, however word you want to use to describe it. Rani v'simchi bat Zion, ki niva v'shachanti b'tochech ne'um Adonai. Shout, enjoy, rejoice, Zion, because I am going to dwell amongst you. That's what Zechariah says here, comes back and sort of recalls back to us other verses that say the same thing. Bnei Yisrael now, it's not just God who's going to be rejoicing. Now the people are going to be rejoicing. Here we'll see things that again relate to earlier prophecies, that recall earlier prophecies. V'nilvu goyim rabim el Adonai b'yomahu, v'ayuli la'am, v'shachanti b'tochech v'yadata ki Adonai tzvaot shalchani elayich. In that day, many nations will attach themselves to God and become God's people, and God will dwell in your midst. Then you will know that I was sent to you by God, right? Things are going to eventually, you're going to be the top of you've been the worst, you've been the destroyed Judah, Bnei Yisrael, but now in the future you're going to be the top, and all the other nations are going to come as well. That's sort of following the vision of Yeshaya Parak Bet, where he talks about the same word is used, Vinilvu, that you're going to be accompanied. It's not just going to be you worshiping God, but everybody's going to come. And of course, the verse that he uses there, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, and we had that repeated in other books. It's the vision, even though he's taking from Yechezkel. And when we talked about Yechezkel's vision of the temple, Yechezkel's vision of the temple was one that was very, there was like an iron wall, right? The Gentiles weren't allowed in it. The Bnei Yisrael were only allowed to a certain point. The priests were only allowed to a certain point because it was about the concentration of God. And if we get too close, we're going to sin and things are going to be destroyed. That's not, even though he started with this measuring line, he talks about the fire and God being in it and God's glory over and over again. It's not that same restricted vision that we have in Zechariah. Continuing verse 16, God will give once again to Judah his special portion in the Holy Land, and once again will choose Jerusalem. Haskol basar mipnei Adonai, ki neor mimaon kadsho. So everybody in the world, be silent in front of God. God is roused from his holy abode, right? God, in a sense, you could say almost like was sleeping, and now God is aroused. God is getting up, and you are in trouble as a result, because God is ready to come back to Jerusalem to bring back the Jewish people. And here we see, again, similar thing. Zechariah talking about, we talked about this yesterday. If Haggai is about the people coming and just do it and building the temple, at least up to this point, Zechariah is about God coming back to the temple. And will Haggai's prophecies come true about about the Pasha, Zerubbabel, the descendant of King David becoming a great king? Will Zechariah's prophecies about God coming fully, sort of God's full concentration, whatever that means, into the temple, into Jerusalem? Will it be a wall of fire around it, that the Jews don't have to worry about enemies? So we know that those two things don't come together, and part of it is coming back to the middle of this chapter. We know that the great majority of the Jewish people did not go back to rebuild the second Beit HaMikdash. The great majority of them stayed in Bavel. The great majority of them were threatened due to Haman. Now, Judah would have also been presumably within the 127 province Persian Empire of Achashverosh. But a lot of the Jews stayed in exile, and the sad thing is because the Jews stayed in exile. Presumably, that's why the concentration of God was not as great in the Second Temple as was in the first, even though the prediction is there. I think we said it yesterday as well. Right? We have this hope, but the rabbis understand the way the temple is described, not just the way it's built and not being as magnificent, because God says, I don't care about that. Just go up to the mountain, get some wood, and build me a temple. The Second Temple never achieves the level of kedusha, of sanctity, of miraculous understandings, like it was believed in the first temple. And this has a lot to do. God wants to come back fully, but the Jews have to come back fully as well. And so we don't see that, but we'll see. What are the Jews going to do? How are they sinning? What things are they going to do better? We'll continue with that in tomorrow's chapter.